This week on the Orange Box Podcast, we talk about more features revealed for the Switch 2, Miyazaki giving more information on Duskbloods, Doug Bowser pulling a Don Mattrick, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 79. I am your host, the man who got eaten by an armed and legged treasure chest, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who is renaming his channel in light of his Metroid fanboy status, Justin, better known as I am Zeracon Prime 4 Beyond. How you doing today? How's your week been?
Honestly, the week's been more or less just uneventful. Nothing really too much has happened, which is fine with me. I don't mind slow weeks. I'll be happy though once the weather is a bit more consistent over here. It started getting warmer, but then over this past week, it's been fluctuating heavily. So one day it's nearly 80 degrees, next day it's in the 50s. And it's just been very all over the place. So I'm hoping that over the next few weeks or so, maybe it'll be more consistent and it'll just be warm and then no up and down stuff. But yeah, that's really it. Nothing really has been happening with me.
All right, so my week, good and bad things this week. I mean, nothing like drastically bad, just general stuff, but of course, so last week when I was editing the podcast, I had all sorts of problems. First of all, I realized, as I told you, that I had accidentally had my Audacity recording going from my webcam mic, so it was like just absolute garbage audio. Thankfully, the video version did actually have my correct microphone, so I was able to pull the audio from that, so the audio was fine from that standpoint. However, I had a ton of sniffles throughout the recording, and I thought I got them all, but I missed a bunch. And so, even after I did all of that, I missed those. And then, of course, there was other issues between, because of the fact that I didn't have the clips uploaded, ready to go before we recorded, I had to, take the time to get them in and organize it properly when we were discussing all of our games and stuff. And, the whole Switch conference, and there was a bunch of stuff I had to cut out of that. I ended up not getting bed until almost 1 o'clock in the morning, which was, it sucked. Especially because of the fact that I still missed all those sniffles. That's just like, but I don't think I'm going to go back and fix it at this point. It's just kind of like, it is what it is. I'm just going to be more careful, and hopefully I won't have as many issues this time. I made sure to take some allergy medicine a while before we started, so hopefully my nose will be dry enough that I'm not going to be sniffling much. Either way, I'm going to be listening out extra for any sniffles during the recording when I am editing tomorrow. But of course, I didn't have to get up early the next day. I mean, I technically got to sleep in. I think I slept probably only really until like 6 o'clock, which isn't, really sleeping in, but it's mostly just because I woke up earlier than I planned on, and I ended up having several errands I had to do before we left for our marriage retreat. So we went to Branson, Missouri for our marriage retreat with our church, and we had a great time. The drive down was kind of stressful because we had like really bad storms. I mean, it wasn't like tornado or anything, but it was just like it started off just really light, not bad in terms of rain, but then as we got maybe about halfway through the drive, we started getting like really, really heavy rain to the point where it was difficult to see without even with the windshield wipers going as fast as they could. And it was just kind of a bit stressful of a drive, and we took back roads to get to Branson because you can take a freeway that's a little bit faster, but we hate driving on the freeway, especially during a rainstorm. And so we just opted to take the back ways, and we got like a flood warning partway during our drive, and we just was like, we just gotta keep going. We're not gonna slow down. We're not gonna stop. We're just gonna keep going. And we made it there just fine, and wasn't really a big issue. The drive back didn't really have any rain that I recall, or very, very little, so it was pretty uneventful coming back. But yeah, it was a good time. Got lots of quality time with my bride, and we got to go out for sushi, among some other things. Really good sushi. There's these, they had these, we got an appetizer there that was, I think they were called like jalapeno firecracker bombs or something to that effect. Basically, they took a whole jalapeno, stuffed it with crab, real crab, and cream cheese, and then they dipped it in tempura batter and fried it, and then they cut it in half, and then on top of it put the sriracha mayo and I think some eel sauce. It was so good. It was ridiculous. And everything was great. I mean, we got like 3 different sushi rolls, and it's probably the freshest sushi we've had, because usually, like, if we get sushi, most of the time we're just like going to Sam's Club or something, and it's pretty decent. So yeah, usually we just get it from like Sam's Club, but they do like imitation crab in there, which tastes good, but it's not quite the same. And of course, because it's refrigerated for a while, the fish is not quite as fresh. But then when we got it at this restaurant, it's just like super fresh, really, really good, and it was pretty great. There's one thing they have at the restaurant which we didn't try because I thought it was just a little too white. And yes, I'm very pale white guy, and my wife is a very pale white woman, but so it's what they call the Branson roll. It's a California roll, but it's tempura battered and deep fried, which would probably be delicious. Like, I'm sure it would be delicious because California rolls are great as it is, and then you add tempura batter and deep fry it, it's probably gonna be great. But I just can't bring myself to order something like that. That's a little too redneck for me. That's the word I was looking for. So we didn't do that, but we did some with fresh. I think we did one that was a Hawaiian roll, which had, I believe, salmon on top. Or no, it was tuna. That one was tuna. And then I don't remember what was in it exactly, but and then there was a rainbow roll, which was, I think, basically like California roll except with real crab in it, and it had it had shrimp on one end, then in the middle was salmon, and then on the other end was tuna. And then it was a tempura calamari roll, so it was just calamari, deep fried calamari inside of the sushi roll, and I have a hard time remembering what sushi with the seaweed on the outside is called versus inside, because like I know that I have it, like I've learned it before, I've learned the difference, I just don't remember offhand what it is. But you might remember better than me since you have more of the Japanese culture studies and been to Japan and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember. I can't remember if it's supposed to be like a maki roll or something like that. I mean, I could be wrong,
there's
but
maki.
I understand what you mean.
Maki is one of them, and I there's a different one that's, because I think I know one of them is with the seaweed on the inside, and then one of them is with the seaweed on the outside, and I don't remember which is which. But because I remember that in the past when we still lived in Alaska, I had gotten a sushi making kit and I made my own sushi, and it was good-ish. It was nowhere near as good as the real stuff, especially because of the fact that I hadn't really done it, so I didn't quite have the right experience. It tasted great, it just presentation wasn't nearly as good as I wanted it to be. But anyway, so yeah, so we had a good time on our time there. We didn't like do any real extracurricular activities, I guess. I mean, we had several it was like 6 sessions of like a Bible study thing that was connecting the book of Philippians to marriage, and just how, you know, different aspects apply to married life. And we had a great speaker for that. Did some activities with other couples as well, but a lot of it was just getting time away from the kids and all that good stuff. Yeah, not much else to say about it. That was good. The only thing was that I like very specifically made sure not to bring any video games with me, because I wanted to make sure that I had just plenty of time with my wife and all that. But did get a little bit of gaming time after that. I kind of made up for it a bit on a Sunday evening and Monday and Tuesday, where I could anyway. We haven't planted the trees yet. We were originally planning to do it, but then we realized that we needed to check with the city to make sure that we dig in the right spots where we're not going to hit any like gas or water lines or anything. So my wife was able to get in touch with them today while I was working and mark the spots where we want to put the trees, and then they'll come out hopefully within the next few days and mark where the lines are, so that we can make sure we're not digging in the wrong spot, and then we can hopefully get those planted this weekend. Worst case scenario, maybe Monday or something. We'll see. But otherwise, really what I would say is kind of more the bad side of things is honestly just I'm burnt out, like on everything. It's like between responsibilities in my job and all the things that I want to do versus the time I have to do them. It's just been kind of a rough couple days. I was feeling it a lot more this morning than anything else. And so I'm just kind of dealing with it, trying to figure out how to best tackle everything, and some things are easier than others to deal with. So it is what it is. I mean, it's not like I will, to be completely clear, like this isn't me saying that I'm tired of anything having to do with my wife or kids, because I'm definitely not. I love them to death. You know, they're easily one of the bright shining spots in my life, but it's just general stuff and responsibilities and coming up with dinner every night. And I mean, I've been able to make some good stuff lately. That's been nice, but it's just I'm tired. That's all there is to it. Haven't been sleeping the greatest either, so that doesn't help much. But at least I've been able to get some gaming in the past few days, and I want to hear what you've been playing.
Before I get into that, though, I'm glad that you had a great time going out with your wife. But I did have a question, though, because I was curious after hearing everything you were mentioning about the different sushi rolls. It doesn't have to be like a top anything list, but what are some of your favorite sushi rolls?
You know, it's hard for me to say because it's so rare that I actually get to have sushi that isn't just like the stuff from Sam's Club. And I mean, like, they have actual sushi chefs there. I do want to clarify that. You know, like actual people from Japan, you know, making the sushi. It's just the quality of ingredients you get there versus what you get in an actual restaurant. It's different. I mean, you get what you pay for. But still pretty good. But anyway, like, as a general rule, at least whenever I'm getting sushi from like Sam's Club or what have you, California roll's always up there. I really like different various rolls, usually with tuna. I think tuna is probably my favorite when it comes to the raw fish. Salmon's really good too, but I think I like the tuna better of those. There's one called a tiger roll we've had a couple times, and then there's like another one with tempura shrimp. Those are really good. Usually I like having more stuff without sauces than stuff with sauces, because the sauces are good, but a lot of times they just go overboard and they just put way too much, and it's like I want to taste the sushi more than just all the mayo-based sauces. It's like, a little bit here and there, sure, but when you have so much that you have more of that than you can actually taste the rice and the fish and everything, it's kind of pointless to me. What about you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sort of, I guess you can sort of tell it's like a regional thing. Like one of the things I enjoy is at least for the I guess restaurants that we have in my area is because it's Maryland, we gotta have crab. So the special crab rolls that people have, like for example, there's one called a Maryland roll where it's like crab meats. I think a couple of them might have some other types of variant of fish, depending on where you get it from, but then also just like your celery, and then a few other different things rolled in there. Even though this one's very basic, I'm just in love with this, and that's a Philadelphia roll where it's salmon, cream cheese, and whatnot.
Yeah,
and
very good.
That one's, whenever I get a combo, I always have to have at least one Philadelphia roll just because I just enjoy that so much. And then shrimp tempura, I enjoy that so much. Yeah. That's good, red stuff. But yeah, I guess those I would say are my favorites. I haven't had anything that I would say is bad, but those would be the ones I would say I love the most.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I'm not real picky when it comes to sushi. The only thing I think that neither I or my wife have really cared for much is the eel-based ones. Eel just, I mean, like, I haven't had it a whole lot. I'd probably have to try it again to say for sure, but I feel like that was one where neither one of us particularly cared for it, whereas we love pretty much everything else. So it was actually for our 5th anniversary, we went to Hawaii, and that was, almost 11 years ago. And they had a sushi buffet in Oahu that we went to on our anniversary, and it was like, oh man, there were so many different things. The one thing that's bad about that, though, is that's where I tried kimchi, and I did not like it. But I think it's mostly because it was cold, and I feel like kimchi would probably be better if it was heated up. Like if it was sauteed, added some rice or something, it would probably be really good. I bought some a little while ago, and I haven't opened up the package yet because I haven't figured out the best way to prepare it, how I want to do it, but I definitely want to give it another try because it seems like it would be something I would like because I like Korean spices and I like cabbage. I typically like cooked cabbage. I mean, I'm not a fan of sauerkraut, which is fermented cabbage, but to me that's technically, I mean, in my opinion, that's basically rotten cabbage, and which is why I don't like it. But anyway, yeah, that's enough about that. All right, what you been playing?
All right, so just getting this one out of the way, I played some more Wall World just because I really wanted to see if I could beat the DLC, and I actually did manage to beat the DLC this time, much to my amazement, actually. It was close, though. I almost did not end up beating the DLC, but I managed to scrape by in the final fight, and that was great. Unfortunately, I was trying to go back because I wanted to get the rest of the achievements for the game, and the RNG is just so against me ever since that one win. Like, I can't even get past the first 2 boss fights without dying because either I don't have enough resources to level up everything I need, or I can't find the right weapons that I actually would need to make proper progress. So it's really getting to the point where I'm just so frustrated that I'm pretty much just done with this game, I think. I mean, I was already kind of done, but only because I beat the DLC did I get a resurge of enthusiasm and say, all right, I'm going to keep playing now. I mean, maybe I'll come back here and there and try to do it because it's really just 3 achievements, and one of them, well, I'm sorry, 3, no, it's 4 achievements. 2 of them just require getting enough blueprints to max everything. Unfortunately, one of them requires you actually getting to a semi-boss fight, and you are supposed to intentionally lose that fight. But the problem is, I can't get that far in order to actually get to that boss fight. And the other two achievements that aren't related to like leveling up everything, it's just, well, no, they are related to leveling up. It's to level up the weapons the DLC weapons that you get during those runs. And unfortunately, that requires getting very far into the DLC. Like I said, the problem is I keep dying before I can actually make that much progress. So it might be something I come back to on and off here and there, but I just have no more enthusiasm for this. So I'm just like, I'm moving on now from that.
Yeah.
But I've been playing also more Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, and I didn't really get too far into this. I got essentially to the boss fight that's being played here, and I did manage to beat the boss. The problem is, though, is that I should have saved after playing this, because I went to the next world and said, hey, I'll save once I get there. That's no big deal, you know, then I'll switch back to Riku and continue playing. I died during the dive because I didn't know it was going to be a boss fight dive.
Oh no.
And the problem is I could continue, but if I did continue, that would count against the achievement where you play through entirely without using it to continue or retry. So unfortunately, there's a lot of progress that I need to do all over again before I can do that. And so I'm a bit upset about that, but I'm just like, all right. Lesson learned: save if you're doing these types of things.
Well, at least it's not having to replay a bunch of Dark Souls 2.
Oh, good. Oh, goodness. Yes, you are so right.
Yes, anytime you come across a situation like that, you could just remember what I went through with Dark Souls 2.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I got a finger cut, but you got like impaled 5 times. But I'll probably still just, come back to this eventually, because, I mean, I didn't lose too much progress, but it's just, like, leveling up a few times and getting a few abilities and whatnot. But, yeah, that's what I've been doing for that. Played some more Satisfactory with some friends. They were pretty much just trying to make things more efficient on the base. I was doing mostly exploration stuff. And unfortunately, there were 2 instances where I really messed up. One instance was when I was just trying to figure out what was going on in our base. I missed a ladder and fell off the edge because our base is right near a cliff. Fortunately, I did not die, which was the scary thing, because if I died, I would lose all the equipment I had and all my stuff. And depending on where I died, I might not be able to get my loot back, which would be a problem. Fortunately, that didn't happen. However, trying to get off the ledge I fell on was difficult because there was no way to climb up. And eventually I thought about it. I said, let me see if I can build something. And so eventually I found out where to build a ladder. I just built a ladder straight up. Fortunately, I had enough resources to do that. Otherwise, I would have just been out of luck. So I did that, did some exploration, found some stuff, and even I thought, since I'm out here, I might as well try to just do some random stuff for achievements. So there are these giant, I can't remember what they're called specifically, but they're called something like Giraffe, Tick, Bear Thingies. Yeah, it's sort of like,
I think that's the title of this episode: Giraffe, Bear, Tick Thingies.
Essentially, it has the height of a giraffe, the body of a tick, and it makes a growl like a bear. It's completely harmless, but if you jump on it, you bounce. And one of the achievements is to not touch the ground for 30 minutes. So essentially, I was just trying to bounce on the back of this thing the entire time while it's moving around. It was interesting. I thought, I have nothing better to do right now, so I'm just going to go for that. So I did manage to do that. And then eventually, as I was doing some more exploration, I fell off another cliff. And this one was worse, though, because unlike the first one where I had time to think about what to do, when I landed on this ledge, there was nothing but poisonous plants all around me. So they're spewing toxic gas, and I need to quickly eat food so I can replenish my health. All the while trying to figure out how to get out of there. And unfortunately, there was nowhere to make a proper ladder. So I kept thinking, I was talking to the guys saying, hey, what do I do? I'm almost out of food right now. How do I get out of here? And then they said, try to make a platform and try to walk around that and get out of there. So I did that, and eventually I was able to get far enough where I could actually think some more. And then eventually I just built a ramp and then walked back up to the higher ground. And this time I was like, yeah, I'm gonna stay far away from any types of ledges, because that's going to be my downfall, literally. But but yeah, I mean, other than that, found some good stuff in the game, and while they're doing stuff on the base, I'm just looking around, goofing off essentially. But yeah, that's what I've been doing with that. And next, this is a game that I saw it randomly, I think, on YouTube, and I didn't watch much of this, but because it's a short game, but it's something called Swallow the Sea. And essentially you are without spoiling things, you're a cell, you're sort of like a cell that is trying to grow, but there are also other things that are around you trying to eat you, so you must consume other cells and other types of organisms, and you must grow and eat them, and continue to do that essentially throughout the game. And well, there's more I could say, but that's really just gonna spoil the entire game, so I'm not gonna say much more of that. But for some reason, something kept clicking into my head. I thought, I like this type of game. This is definitely a type of game I've played before, but I can't remember what type of game this is. And then eventually I thought about it and realized, oh, this is like Katamari.
Yeah, that's what I was
trying
thinking.
to go around, get stuff, just like a 2D Katamari. And so I was like, this is good. And actually this game is free on Steam. You can definitely go ahead and download it. It's pretty short. I beat this in about 18 minutes or so. Now I didn't get this on Steam just because for some reason this is a game that is one of those limited account types of games where it's like, oh, certain stuff doesn't count for your profile and whatnot. And because I did have that with one game in the past, I tried to avoid those types of games if possible. But fortunately, the devs put the game, I think, initially on itch.io, so I got it there and played it that way. But yeah, you can definitely download it on Steam. You can get it on itch.io and play it. It's pretty, like I said, short, but it's fun for what it is. I wish that the devs did do something more with this and make an actual fully fledged game. I would buy that. Of course, it would need to be longer than 18 minutes, but I would buy that. I definitely think this is pretty fun for what it is. I do like this type of game. But yeah, this is definitely, I liked it. And then lastly, this was a random spur of the moment play for me. I played Monster Hunter World, and it's partially because I had a bit of an itch to play Monster Hunter, and also I wanted to just go back and see if I could enjoy World, because I didn't really care for it too much when I first started playing it. Although granted, my frame rate wasn't all that impressive when I played it the first time on my old laptop. But yeah, so I went back and played some of it. Unfortunately, I had to relearn some things because things were sort of more different than what you would encounter from your traditional type of Monster Hunter, generations and beforehand, and even to a degree Rise. So definitely did have to relearn those elements for World. Additionally, I forgot, well, I wasn't certain if this would happen yet, but when I played World originally, I was using my Switch Pro controller, and because of the fact that X and Y and B and A are reversed from an Xbox controller, I switched things around, my layout and stuff, so when I used the controller this time, it was still using those old inputs, so everything was backwards, essentially, even though I was using the correct buttons this time around, so had to get around that. I didn't play too much of it. I really just did this one mission, and I thought, that's enough for me. I've had enough for one day. But I don't know if I'll come back right now. At least this definitely isn't something that I would say I'm sticking with. It's just something I wanted to try, and also just to see how it felt being playing at more than 45 frames per second. So that definitely was an enjoyable experience on that end. But yeah, that is everything that I've played.
A question about Monster Hunter World, because I've never played it before. I'm guessing this one came out after Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
so I'm assuming it has the Charge Blade in there.
I think so. I think it should have the Charge Blade.
Okay, good. Because I've been interested in checking this one out potentially at some point, mostly just because of the fact that Wilds runs so horribly, and from everything I've heard, World is they fixed all the performance issues that it used to have, that it runs really well now. So not that I'm in any rush, but it's more like, oh, I'll probably grab it on a sale, and I'd be curious to see how it runs on the Steam Deck. Because I think I remember hearing that it ran at 60 on the Steam Deck. So
that's definitely possible. It's possible, I'd say.
I mean, since it was a PS4 game, theoretically it should be potentially doable, but I could be completely wrong on that front. So. All right. Well, in terms of the games that I've been playing, I guess first of all, I'll just get ones out of the way that I don't have any footage for. One of those, look at my list here. Oh yes, that's right. I very briefly today tried starting up Prey on the Steam Deck because I have the GOG version that I got for free through Amazon Prime. Unfortunately, because I didn't have the right Proton layer installed or the right Wine version or whatever, it didn't start up for me. So I didn't bother messing with it because I was at the office today anyway. So I was like, I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'll look it up and figure it out later. I just was interested in at least checking it out. But getting into like the main things, actually, I guess I can also mention something that I tested out yesterday or the day before on the Steam Deck again, because I wanted to see if that VRAM increase that I had done before, if that would make a difference on the game, was Death Stranding, and it didn't make any difference. I think that the only game where that actually made a difference was for Guardians of the Galaxy, because I feel like there's something wrong with the programming to where it wasn't automatically using the 4 gigs of video RAM, and instead was just using 1, which is why it had performance issues initially. But I mean, Death Stranding is still like, it's kind of hit or miss on performance, so I didn't play long. I played for like 10 minutes just checking to see if it could get a consistent 40 or anything, and it definitely wasn't doing that, let alone better. So just kind of all over the place. I still love the game, but I didn't really want to mess around with performance issues there. But going back to like the main stuff I've been playing, so I did continue playing Eye of the Somnium Files, and I finished it on Sunday, I think. It was either Sunday or Monday. Oh yeah, that's right. I basically finished it on Sunday. Like I got to the end of the story, and then there was like some epilogue stuff that I just finished up on Monday. Here, I'm still not showing actual footage from the game, just the initial trailer, because I don't want to spoil anything, but it was very good, and it's very obvious it was made by the Zero Escape team. That's about all I can say from that standpoint, but yes, it was very good. I like the Zero Escape series better, but that's not to say this isn't good. It's very good. I can't remember if I mentioned it last week, but on the Steam Deck, this runs at basically a locked 90 frames per second. The only time it ever drops below that is when it's in loading screens, and otherwise it's always 90, locked at all times, and it gets like, I want to say 4 hours of battery life with that, so it's not too bad. But I really wanted to play the next game, and unfortunately, it is not on sale. And so I'm kind of like waiting for a sale for the Steam version, but it was on sale for only $9 digital on the Switch, so I grabbed the second one on there. I played for a little bit, and because I was thinking, okay, this is a game that doesn't need above 30 frames per second. You know, it's a visual novel. There's basically nothing where having a higher frame rate makes a difference in terms of ability to play the game. And so I played a bit on the Switch, but even though the game still looks great, I mean, you know, they definitely don't have anti-aliasing in the game, which honestly doesn't really bother me on a small screen. I think it actually kind of sometimes makes the games looks better. I'll even do that on the Steam Deck sometimes to help with performance, because it does do quite a bit for performance. But even with that being the case, the game still looks really good on the Switch. However, that 30 frames per second, especially because there's stutters sometimes, it was hard to play at that lower frame rate. It was harder than I expected it to be, and I think it's just because everything was so much less smooth. And so I ended up, I just stopped playing. I didn't play super long anyway. I think I played probably a couple hours, if that. And I mean, between the fact that it doesn't run the best and the fact that, you know, that meant I had to basically borrow the Switch, use the Switch instead of the kids being able to use it, I ultimately just decided to that I'm not going to play it for now. That may change later on. I may change my mind on that, but I think a lot of it just depends on how impatient I get. Because if the game gets discounted enough on Steam to make it, you know, worth it, then I'll buy it. But it's like I don't want to spend $60 on this game. Like, I know it's not going to be a super long game. I mean, I'll enjoy it. I'm sure I will, because I've enjoyed their other games. But $60 is just a bit too much for a game that's at least, I want to say this was like 2021 that it came out. So, yeah, it's more than I want to spend. But anyway, so I'll just keep my eyes peeled for a sale on that. And in the meantime, I was kind of like trying to decide what I actually wanted to play. And I decided to reinstall Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, because that one I don't have all the achievements in. In fact, before this, I had only done the one mission. Because basically, when you play this, there's one mission which is story related, and basically it's just it connects Peace Walker to Phantom Pain. And basically, it's just like that bridge in between that also is essentially a gameplay demo for what you'll get with Phantom Pain in terms of gameplay. And it's great, but it's very short. There are a bunch of side missions you can do as well, though, that unlock after you do that one story mission. And so I decided, okay, well, I'm going to boot this up. I'm going to start working on getting some achievements. And, part of that is getting S rank on all the missions, which I did on 2 of them, one of which being the story-based one, and then one of the other ones as well. The footage here is me doing the story one, getting S rank on that. And, yeah, I mean, the game still controls beautifully. It runs really well on the Steam Deck, 60 frames per second, easily gets it locked. You can't max out the settings and get a consistent 60. It's not quite that good, but it's pretty close. You can basically do all high settings, and I ended up doing a mix of highest and high, and was still able to get a locked 60. But yeah, the game, so good, so good. And I mean, after I finished redoing the story mission, I basically just put it down, because it's gonna be one that I'll probably just play here and there, just because it is great, but I was also kind of feeling, I guess, antsy, and in the midst of feeling antsy, I was trying to decide what I actually wanted to play, because I kind of wanted to play some more Dark Souls, but then I was also feeling like I'm not sure if I want to play Dark Souls 2 right now. And so I was just kind of going back and forth on it. Like, started up Dark Souls 2 briefly, and I closed it before it even booted up. And then I was looking at different games that I have installed and trying to decide which one would be worth actually jumping into. And ultimately ended up just saying, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play some more Dark Souls 2. So I ended up playing some more. The footage I have here is just from one of the boss fights I did. I forgot to, I guess I didn't export all of the recordings I did, and I didn't end up recording one of the boss fights, or two of them. But I'm now technically past where I was. Well, I am past where I was in my original playthrough, other than maybe being a little bit lower on level and a lot lower on time. I think I have about 20 hours total, and I have beaten, now I'm up to 12 bosses, 11, something like that. So I fought the gargoyles, which thankfully only took a couple tries this time, though I decided to bring in, since I actually had the ability to become a human, I brought in a summon to help me out, and that definitely helped. First time I just got decimated very fast, but then the second time was able to get through the fight and finished it off. I very, very, very nearly died that second time. It was actually shocking to me also as well. So I also went back and fought the Rotten again, and he's the one I told you about, where he picks you up over his head and like twists your body, which can be a one-hit kill. Thankfully, I had enough health that it wasn't a one-hit kill. There was one time he had hit me with his big butcher knife thing a couple times, and I thought that I was dead because I had just like a sliver of health left, and I managed to get away, down a couple of Estus flasks, and survive, and then got through the rest of the fight. I didn't get to cut off any of his arms this time, but I still beat him. And I beat the Lost Sinner again, and the Scorpioness Rajka, I think is what her name is. The Rat Vanguard again. And then I did fight one more boss that I hadn't previously fought, called Prowling Magus and Congregation. And I can't remember the name of the area that I'm in for that, but it's a little bit after the Scorpioness. So yeah, and that one I didn't record, mostly because of the fact that I had gone into that fight not knowing it was going to be a boss fight in there. I saw a fog door. It seemed like it was a smaller door, so I didn't think it was going to actually be a boss fight. Turns out it was, and so it's like I didn't even have a chance to hit record. I just fought it, beat it, and moved on from there. Got to the next bonfire and then stopped playing. But then today, when I initially had tried booting up Prey and couldn't get that started up, I decided to try another game that I had installed from GOG, and that's SteamWorld Quest, the Hammer of Gilgamesh. So, of course, this is from the creators of SteamWorld Dig and SteamWorld Build and The Gunk and other such things. I had avoided this one before because it's like a turn-based card RPG, and I loved their Metroidvania ones for SteamWorld Dig 1 and 2. I'm not a huge fan of this type of genre, but since it was a free game and I do really like Image and Form as a developer, I decided I'd go ahead and give it a shot. And I've only played roughly about an hour, maybe a little less than that. I just played during my lunch break today, but I like it so far. I don't expect it to be a super long game. I mean, it has good music. I've never been a huge fan of the animations that they have for their stuff on these games, but the art is cool, and I mean, the game is still solid. So I think that's really all I have to say about that. And I don't think there's any other games I played. But yeah, I think probably, this weekend I might end up booting up like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because Saturday marks 1 year since Gabe Patillo passed away. So, and that was a game that Final Fantasy VII was his favorite game of all time, and Rebirth was one that he had started but didn't get to finish before he died. So, kind of doing it in memory of him, and also because obviously I haven't finished the game. We'll see if I actually have time to do it, but if I have time, then I will probably play some of that. But yeah, that should be everything.
So, with the sequel to Isomnium, is that a direct sequel, or is that something like the other games where they're just like separate altogether, but part of the same like series?
So yes and no. I would say it's a sequel in a similar way to how Virtue's Last Reward was a sequel to 999. Now, I guess I will say, just to correct what I said last week, Virtue's Last Reward is the second game in that series, and the last game is Zero Time Dilemma. So I had mixed up the titles for those. But anyway, so this one is, like, it has a lot of the same characters, so it is kind of a direct sequel, but it's not. I mean, most of what happens in this game, at least from what I played so far, takes place 6 years after the first game, and the story is not directly connected to the first one. It's kind of like, at least so far, there's like some flashbacks to events that happened after the end of the first game, but doesn't really mention the first game much at all, because more or less they're just, I think that they're mostly trying to keep it spoiler free for people who are coming in on the second game. So you could play this one without having played the first one. And they even at the very beginning, when you're doing like kind of like the tutorial thing, they say, are you familiar with the case from this last game? And then they require that you answer questions correctly in order to prove that you actually played the first game. And they say that it's not going to impact the story, but this is just that way. If they happen to say anything that would spoil something about the first game, it's stuff basically they wouldn't say if you hadn't played the first game. So, and the at least from what they've said, they're not connected story-wise, other than the fact that one takes place after the other, but they're not, like, these are two completely different cases from one game to the next.
And while you did say you didn't play much of this one, from what you've played, mainly because of performance reasons, but based on what you've played so far, how do you like it compared to the first game?
I can definitely tell there's some quality of life improvements over the first one, but it's not like dramatic differences. It's kind of like the difference between 999 and Virtue's Last Reward. It just has some quality of life improvements here and there. Visually, I think it is a little better looking, but not like dramatically so, because the first game looked really good. I haven't really played enough to say much more, but I think that's pretty much the way I would summarize it.
Okay. Oh man, I did have one. I had one question for Dark Souls 2 that I'm trying to remember now, and I thought I typed it down while you were talking, but I think it had to do with one of the areas you were in, but now I can't remember. Well, no, you said you didn't know what area it was that you were in, where you faced the new boss.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah. So
I will real quick. I'll just mention about that area. That was where I encountered the mimic, my first mimic of this game, that ate me the first time because I wasn't even thinking. Like, I saw a warning from an online player that said, monster ahead, try attacking or something like that, and all I saw was the treasure chest, and it didn't even occur to me this would probably be a mimic, and tried opening it and got eaten immediately. And then, of course, the next time I came back, I made sure to throw one of the Lloyd's talismans at it to put it to sleep, grabbed the item, and then killed it. But... oh yeah, also my character's at like level 85 or so, and I'm 20 hours in, so but from what I can see, it seems like recommended levels in this game go up to like 120 for some of the later bosses. And it also looks like there might not be quite as many bosses as I thought, because when I looked at one thing, it told me it looked like there were like 40 bosses, and when I'm looking at, or when I looked at another list today, it looked like it was more like probably 30, which is significantly less. But anyway.
And I guess on that, when the previous thing you were mentioning, this was the first mimic. Is that based on what you've played in other Souls games, is that kind of late to be encountering one? I would think that you would normally face a mimic a little sooner than that.
I mean, it feels kind of late, but I could be wrong, because like I know in Dark Souls 1, the first one I encountered was it was in Sen's Fortress. That was the very first one I came across, and then beyond that, I honestly don't remember. I mean, like there was quite a few of them after that, and once I knew what to look out for, it was easy to spot them. I haven't figured out what exactly it is to look out for to know it's a mimic in this game. I need to look that up though, because unfortunately these ones don't seem to have chains like the ones in Dark Souls 1 did, because Dark Souls 1 is like, you have if the chain is going towards you, it's a mimic. If it's going backwards, then it's not. And so I'm sure that there's some other obvious tell that I just wasn't paying close enough attention to notice, but I need to look that up.
You don't want to just go around smacking chests all day to tell?
I mean, that could definitely work, and I'm strong enough that I could certainly take him out in a couple hits, but I would definitely rather not be in a position where I have to take that chance.
Yeah. I'll definitely have to make a note of that for whenever I decide to get back into Dark Souls 2. Just remember that mimics don't work the way they normally do.
I mean, it is possible that there was some kind of chain that I just didn't notice, but really it's because I wasn't even expecting it to be there, and I hadn't encountered any mimics yet in the game, so like I just wasn't looking out for it. But I'll look it up and find out for sure.
Good stuff.
All right, anything else?
No, sir.
All right, let's get into the news. So, of course, last week we had a bunch of talk about the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, and since then there's been a whole lot of not so positive stuff about the Switch 2 and pricing and all sorts of nonsense. One thing that I do want to mention, just as a quick side note, from what it appears, it looks like there's not going to be a price difference between the physical and digital versions, and that the $90 is not what Mario Kart World is going to cost. It's actually still going to be $80. It's going to be $80 for both physical and digital, which I mean is better, but it's still too much money. And I do also want to mention, because we're not going to be talking much about this, but Nintendo did clarify, despite what many people jump to conclusions about, that the price was not taking into account the tariffs. Now, I just want to say quickly regarding the tariffs, we're not going to be talking about that today. We're not going to dive into that, mostly because we don't know enough of how it's going to affect things. And I have seen so many people jumping to conclusions based on either their hatred or love of the president, to where you're just not getting people thinking rationally, and people just jumping on one bandwagon or another depending on what they think of the man. We're just not diving into that. We're going to wait and see what actually happens. We're going to see if these tariffs have any effect on anything or if they don't, especially with things having been paused for 90 days and, I mean, outside of for China. But like I said, we're just not diving into that. So talking about the other stuff, the first topic of which is that NVIDIA has confirmed that the Switch 2 has a custom chip that they made for the system, that it will have a form of DLSS and AI upscaling that's being used, which we had theorized about plenty. Lots of people had said that that was probably going to be the case. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's great that we have this confirmation, especially since this is a technology that I think well, maybe not should, but I think it could be utilized to help with, performance and stuff like that. It does make me wonder, though, how many games are going to actually be running natively 4K as opposed to just being upscaled at 4K. Because, I mean, we Nintendo is, touting, hey, you got, I mean, they say output to 4K, but it's like, well, how many of those games are actually running natively at 4K instead of being up-res? And I mean, don't get me wrong, DLSS is better than FSR, but at the same time, I kind of would still like to do native if possible, which is kind of like what I said before last week, where I said, it's ambitious for them to target 4K, but I would much rather them do something that's more manageable, like, say 1440p instead. Like, that's still a good resolution. I'd rather have like a native 1440p rather than an upscaled 4K. But I mean, if it helps, then it can help. But then it also makes me wonder, sort of like, okay, so how many games so far are actually running at, like, for example, first game that actually popped in my head was, so is Metroid Prime 4 on the Switch 2 running at native 4K, or is that going to be like upscaled 4K? Which I'm like, it's interesting now that I think about it, now that they've actually confirmed that it's using DLSS. But I mean, I think it's neat that we have this stuff. What I want to know, though, is I want more information about sort of like the specifics. Like, I want to know more about the actual hardware that's being used. Like, I want to know like how much RAM is in this thing, for one thing. I mean, I know it's definitely got to be more than the 4 gigs that Nintendo originally put in the Switch. So I'm like wondering, it's like 16 gigs, because that would be pretty nice. I mean, I feel like that's almost sort of like a given for if you're gonna be playing some games on like an APU or something that doesn't have a dedicated GPU, and you gotta like share that system memory. So I would like more, specifics on the specs of the Switch 2, but at least for this information, we have that knowledge now. I'm hoping that, I mean, it might still end up being this way, but I'm hoping that DLSS isn't going to be used as a crutch for a lot of stuff here. I mean, it might be, but I don't know. It's just like the one thing that I feel like upscaling has been this Pandora's box of now devs just using it instead of trying to just optimize their games as best as they can to get the most performance out of it. And just like, yeah, we're just going to use DLSS, we're just using upscaling and stuff like that, and don't worry about it. But yeah, that's essentially everything I have to say on this topic.
Yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from with the DLS thing, and obviously, like, I've largely been of the same opinion. I think with this device, I feel a bit differently, more just because I've seen what happens when they don't have any sort of upscaler in their games on the regular Switch, just how terrible those games look in handheld mode. And yes, supposedly this thing is 10 times more powerful than the Switch, which is pretty crazy. I mean, that's not necessarily saying a whole lot because the Switch was using I think it was 358 megahertz for in handheld mode or something like that for the processing, and so I mean, there's a lot of room to improve performance from that standpoint. I definitely agree that I don't want DLSS to be used as a crutch, but if it's something that can help games that otherwise would look terrible to actually look a lot better, I'm more accepting of it. I wish the DLSS had been an option on the base Switch, because some of those games just look absolutely horrible in handheld mode. Especially I can think of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. That game was honestly one of the worst looking handheld mode games I've ever seen. Or a game like Immortals Phoenix Rising. I'm not sure if that one was worse. I mean, I guess it was in some ways, but I feel like what they did with, especially with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, it reminded me a lot of the fuzzy, really bad resolution that you get with FSR, with the earlier especially FSR 1. It was just absolutely atrocious, and absurdly low resolution for that screen. Because I think that they said it was down to sometimes 240p or lower on the base Switch for Xenoblade Chronicles 2 when it was in handheld mode. It was so bad. And I mean, I put up with it mostly because it was a portable Xenoblade, and of course I really wanted to play it, and it was still a solid game. It's just visually was terrible in handheld mode. But I don't know, I guess I'm of two minds on this, because yeah, I definitely think, as I think about it more, definitely don't want it to be a crutch. Definitely don't want it to be something where it takes the place of actually optimizing the games. But what I would like to see, I think where I'm willing to accept it a bit more is probably when it comes to handheld mode, especially. If they can get the game running at a smooth 60, and then they're using DLSS to improve the visuals so that they're not having to compromise as much, then yeah, I think that's good. I'm much more accepting of that. And I think that the likelihood that we will have any games running at native 4K, with the exception of 2D games, I'd say it's very slim. I doubt Metroid Prime 4 will run at actual native 4K. However, I think if anybody could do it, it would probably be Retro, because of how great of a job they did with Metroid Prime Remastered on the regular Switch. So I think I'm more willing to believe that that's possible with them, with that game. But I have a feeling that probably in the more intense action things, it will drop in resolution and they just use DLSS to make up for it. The only thing that really has me concerned about the use of DLSS and AI stuff is more whether or not they would try to use frame generation, because as we both know, frame generation sucks, and I wish that people just wouldn't even use it. It really made me sad. Earlier I saw there was a video that I came across where it was Monster Hunter Wilds running on the Steam Deck with a fan-made performance mod, and I was like, please tell me this is not frame generated, free frame generation, because it was getting 60 to 80 frames per second. Didn't look great, but for that game, I would be totally fine with it to get that kind of frame rate. Nope, frame generation. What are you getting without it? I mean, I think it's getting like 20 to 30 frames per second at best on the Steam Deck without it. And it's possible they've made some fixes since then, but I haven't heard of any like performance improvements that don't include frame generation. I'm sure that if they got rid of Denuvo, we probably would gain another like 15 to 20 or even 30 frames per second, but you know, who knows when or if that will ever happen. But anyway, yeah, so I mean, I am glad that NVIDIA is, at least that they built a custom chip for this. They're not just using a stock unit like they did with the original Switch. Building something custom means it should theoretically be a lot better than what we got with the base Switch. Of course, there's lots of reasons why I'm going back and forth on when I'm actually going to get the Switch. I mean, obviously, the number one thing is just looking at, okay, what's the price going to be? Is it going to be the $450 to $500, or is it going to end up being a lot more? Because if it's a lot more, I'm not buying it. If it's $450, $500, I'll get it, and I just probably won't buy any games for a while. Just since I have plenty of Switch games already to play. But, yeah. I do want to note real quickly with that. So of course, you know, we saw the thing about both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom being $70 and $80 respectively. Breath of the Wild doesn't come with the DLC, the expansion pack or whatever it was called. For some reason, I don't think that's right. Whatever it was called for Breath of the Wild is not included, despite being $70. And they're trying to say that, oh, this isn't just this isn't emulation of the original game. It's a completely new version. Like, they'll show side by sides. It's like, yeah, I mean, that obviously looks a lot better, but I really believe this is just emulation with upscaling. That's all it is. I don't think they reconfigured everything. I think they're using DLSS to upscale and increasing the frame rate max to 60. I mean, I would love it if those games ran at a locked 60, but I'm kind of skeptical. Even though the footage I've seen so far has looked really good, but I don't know. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say on the matter.
Yep, same here.
Now, as for some not so positive news, depending on how it turns out, we'll kind of have to wait and see, but it has been confirmed that the joysticks on the Switch 2 controllers, both the Joy-Cons and the Pro Controller, will not be Hall effect. And they haven't, all they basically said is that it's something built from the ground up by Nintendo. We don't know what that actually means, though. So what are your thoughts?
So I'm wondering why they're skirting around the topic. I mean, when asked about the joysticks, they said they're not Hall effects, but they feel really good. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'm glad they feel good though. But you know, do I have to worry about stick drift? That's the issue here. Like, that's the thing people want to know. I mean, on one hand, yes, Nintendo has not had an issue with stick drift. I mean, granted, I know I've heard here and there some people said they've had issues with their with N64 sticks, not necessarily with drift, but just that they got loose over time. I personally didn't have any issue, but I do acknowledge that there are some people who've had that issue before with their controllers. But outside of that, Nintendo has never had an issue with their joysticks, or I would just say controllers in general. So, you know, the Switch really knocked off a whole lot of goodwill and trust. It's crazy how one bad incident can ruin your reputation, essentially.
Yeah.
So, while yes, even though previous controllers didn't have Hall effects sticks, and they were fine for generations. Um, I think the fact is though is that there's such a bad taste in gamers' mouths from the original Joy-Con that you really need to knock it out of the park and have a guarantee that this problem isn't going to happen again, or just use Hall effect sticks. I mean, I think that's pretty much it. Because yeah, the joysticks might feel good, and if you're playing for a while, you're saying, yeah, this is fun, this is great. But say after 50 hours of gameplay, then you're playing Mario Kart and you're going, oh, we're drifting into the other lane now. Oh no, we're doing that Tokyo drift and stuff. So I'm really I'm in the camp of I will just have to watch and wait and see, because I am not entirely certain about things here, and unfortunately also this is something that has happened with me, which I thought I would be fine with, or at least I would have any issues with this, is the fact that my Pro controller, the first one I bought, has started to drift a little bit, which I was like, I thought the Pro controller was supposed to be completely free of Joy-Con drift, or at least mostly. So the fact that it is starting to happen with that is very annoying, because I've already tried to repair my Joy-Con sticks, which I already knew they had stick drift, because when I bought it on eBay, the seller said, hey, these have stick drift, just as an FYI. So I was like, fine, I'll just fix that myself. And that was annoying enough trying to fix on its own. So I feel like a Pro controller would be just more intricate, and I just don't want to have to deal with that. So that being said, Nintendo, I hope they fixed whatever issues they had with the original Joy-Cons. Otherwise, they should have just added in Hall effect sticks. That would have been that simple. Just do that, call it a day, no problems. That's all I've got to say there.
Question about your Pro controller: is that using it on PC or is that using it on Switch?
That is both. I think I first noticed it when playing the Switch, because I was playing Breath of the Wild and Link started walking by himself when I put the controller down for a split second. And then I noticed, oh yeah, like I can try to get him to like stop eventually, but it takes a little fidgeting to like get it to work.
Interesting. Yeah, because it's interesting, because like I've noticed sometimes when I've connected it to my PC that I'll get drifting, but on the Switch I don't get any drifting with mine whatsoever, and I've had it since launch. I mean, I will say I'm not a huge fan of the D-pad on the original Pro controller. Like, it feels nice, but it doesn't work great for like 2D platformers, which is really where I want to use it most. In those cases, I ended up finding that it was honestly better using the split D-pad that's on the Joy-Cons for those. But I will say, just as a side note, the most surprising D-pad to me has been the one on the Series X controller. Like, with it being like the circular D-pad and everything, I thought, oh, this is going to be terrible, because like the Xbox One controller had just a regular D-pad and it was really nice. But I'm actually really surprised. This one's actually really good. Like, it works really well at distinguishing the different button presses, and like I used it when I was playing some of the Messenger, and it was working great for that. It was super, super good. I'm usually not a big fan of split D-pads though. Like, I've never really cared for the ones on PlayStation controllers. I think the PlayStation controllers, the big problem is that they're more like the very slippery kind of plastic, and I just always found I had more issues with that than I did when it wasn't that way. When it's more like the matte kind of plastic, then I don't have as many issues with it. But anyway, let's see here. What was I gonna say? Oh yes, so the non-Hall effect sticks. I had forgotten It really shows. You're absolutely right. I had forgotten about the fact that the joysticks before the Switch didn't have this problem. The Wii U ones didn't have it. The Wii didn't have it. The GameCube didn't have it. The N64 didn't have drift. It just, like you said, it gets loose, and they get loose, and I definitely had that problem with a lot of older controllers, or rather, I should say, the ones I got years after my original N64. My original N64 didn't have that problem, but I think I only had it for probably 2 or 3 years before I got rid of it, and then eventually bought another one and ended up finding that issue was pretty common. But yeah, that was like, honestly, that was worse in some ways. Did you ever try sending in your Joy-Cons to get fixed from Nintendo?
I didn't, just because like the Switch I bought was, you know, a secondhand one online, so I didn't know like if that would matter or not, and I didn't really care one way or another about it. So I was like, it is what it is. And I wasn't really planning on using the Joy-Cons anyway. I was just going to use my Pro Controller mostly.
Fair enough. Well, if you ever decide to, you can send those in, and they'll do it for free. They repair Joy-Cons for free.
Okay.
Regardless of the problem with them. So, I've sent in Joy-Cons quite a few times to get repaired. Some of those times were because of drift. Usually it was more connectivity issues that I had. And I think some of my connectivity issues may have actually been a problem with where I had the Switch in relation to the wireless router. I think that was the big problem I was really having with some of those, but regardless, Nintendo fixed them for free, so at least they did that. But in regards to what they're doing in general with these, apart from the fact that, you know, you pointed out, reminded me that joysticks before the Switch didn't have those problems, I'm kind of back and forth on whether or not I believe them. Not in terms of whether or not they're Hall effect, but whether or not they're really something new and different. Because while on the one hand, I would think Nintendo's not going to want to have to repair a bunch of Joy-Cons for free, some other people pointed out to me, well, but probably not a whole lot of people are actually sending them in. More people are probably just buying new controllers instead when their controllers break. And so then basically Nintendo's just kind of like, hey, we'll just get people to buy more controllers if we give them crappy joysticks. So I'm kind of of two minds. Now, of course, being reminded that, you know, the joysticks were fine for the previous generations does make me think maybe, I'm hoping that you're more correct than the cynical side. Especially because I don't want to have to deal with Joy-Con drift, but I don't know. I mean, the other thing is that the drifting isn't exclusive to Nintendo controllers either, because I hear people talking about it happening with PlayStation controllers pretty frequently. I mean, I don't think it's as much, but I mean, it definitely still happens. People who play those a lot more often, and I'm not sure about Xbox. I've never had drift with Xbox controllers or PlayStation for that matter. And the Switch controllers are the only ones where I've had drift of the Nintendo ones. But not my Pro controller, other than when it's connected to my PC. And even then I only do it wired, and then it doesn't always have the problem. But then it never has the problem on the Switch, which is confusing to me why it would. I mean, like, I could see it happening on the Switch and the PC, or happening on the Switch and not the PC. But when it only happens on the PC, that's just weird. I don't know. But anyway. Yeah, I don't think I have any other thoughts on that. I think that was pretty much it.
Yeah. Now, actually, I will say it. I probably won't worry too much about it, because I might do something similar, like I did with my first Switch, and I got the Nitro deck, so it's essentially just sort of like a shell casing sort of, where it has its own controller, own joysticks and stuff, so I might use something like that. And it also had Hall effect sticks, so, you know, I wouldn't have to worry about that. And so it's different. It'll cost some money, but I mean, it also makes the Switch a whole lot easier to hold. It feels more like holding an actual Steam Deck because it's a little bulkier. So I do like that. So depending on what happens, I probably would do something like that with the Switch 2, just so I can get a better grip on things. And even though they say that the Joy-Cons feel better this time around, but I might actually just end up doing something like that instead.
Yeah, I would see first like how it feels on its own, because I mean obviously your hands are big enough to where it's not going to be as comfortable as it is for people with small hands, but it might even work better depending on what you prefer to just get one of the like satisfied grips or something, because I mean like that's what I've been using for my Switch, and that makes a massive difference. And I mean I know how big your hands are compared to mine, but my hands are pretty large, and I always found that to make a significant difference, because like the Steam Deck is comfortable in my hands, the Switch without the grip is not comfortable. It's just too small. But anyway. All right. So you want to talk about what Doug Bowser had to say to people who think the Switch 2 is too expensive?
Oh boy. Oh yeah. So recently Doug Bowser was in an interview and talking about the Switch 2, and he mentioned that essentially the Switch was going to be available for people. Here's what he said specifically, as reported by CBC Canada. As you look at Nintendo Switch 2 and you think about the feature sets that I talked about, we believe that the pricing is appropriate for the value of the machine and the gameplay experience overall. We recognize there are some people that may not be able to afford the Nintendo Switch 2 price point. That's why we wanted to make the other Switch platforms available, so people still have an opportunity to come into our gaming universe, be a part of these characters in these worlds, and see value, if you will, in whatever rung of the platform they come in. And that has struck a chord with a lot of people. They made comparisons to Don Mattrick with the Xbox One, and sort of like talking about what he said about that about the Xbox One for people who might not be able to afford it. And he said, specifically, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity, and actually just talking about the DRM specifically that the Xbox One was going to have. It's called Xbox 360. So I've got several thoughts on this, but what are yours?
Well, hearing the full quote from Doug Bowser, I will say it's not as bad as what Don Mattrick said. I think Don Mattrick was much, much worse. However, I still think it's bad. I think Doug Bowser did a better job explaining what he was trying to say. Whereas I don't know. I mean, it's just Don Mattrick. It just, especially when you hear him when you actually heard him say it, it was just like very much like, if you're too broke to buy the Xbox One, or I mean, if you don't have internet connectivity, you can just buy our old platform. And Doug Bowser essentially said the same thing, just in a more tactful way. And so I think from the standpoint of how he said it, he did a better job, but it still was a bad thing to say. It just, I don't know. I'm not really sure how exactly he would approach it. That may honestly have been one of the best ways to approach the situation. But I don't know, because it's like you have the extreme end of PS3 when they said there was going to be $600 and the guy said you can just get a second job and to buy it. Then you have Don Mattrick who says, well, you don't have internet connectivity, you can just play on the 360 instead. You can just keep playing on the 360. And then you have Doug Bowser, saying, well, there's different tiers, and we want everyone to be able to play. And I mean, it looks like, at least with this, it's probably going to be a while before they stop supporting the Switch 1, but there's still going to be plenty of games that are not going to be available on Switch, like Mario Kart World, for example. And, of course, then third-party games like Elden Ring and Cyberpunk 2077, Final Fantasy VII Remake, stuff like that. Yeah. I feel like they needed to come up with a better PR answer. Even if it's technically the best of those types of answers we've gotten, it's still not a good way to put it. And just the more I hear what Nintendo is saying and what they're doing with their pricing and everything else, I mean, console aside, I'm actually fine with the price of the console. I think the console itself and even the bundle with Mario Kart, those are pretty good prices for what we're getting based on what we've been seeing with PC handhelds and everything else. Even though obviously it can't do as much as a PC handheld, for the price improvement or for the power improvements and everything else, the price of the console itself is not bad. I think it's actually pretty reasonable. But the game prices are the big problem, and the way that they're nickel and diming us, or trying to nickel and dime, which, I mean, obviously, as you said in your video, they're pretty much going to succeed in many ways. I want Nintendo to feel some pain for a change. I want people to actually push back against Nintendo more and actually get them to make some changes in a positive direction. I'm hoping that will include potentially, depending on what happens with tariffs and everything else, I'm hoping that if they do have increased costs, that they will just swallow some of that until things calm down. But once again, I don't really want to get too much into that because right now it's all speculation. We don't know what's happening. At least not for sure. Yeah, I don't know if that I really have any other thoughts, but it's all yours.
Yeah, so first off, I actually don't agree with you. I think the price points for the Switch 2, the console itself, is pretty reasonable. Would I have preferred it to be closer to, like, say, $400? Yes, but I think that it could have been much worse. And based on what we had seen, like if it was, say, halfway as powerful as it could have been, then I would say that would be an absolute scam. Pay $450. But consider the fact that it's running all these games. It's running Elden Ring. Granted, I've seen a couple screenshots between the PS5 and the Switch where I'm like, it doesn't look as good, but it's still running Elden Ring. It's running Cyberpunk 2077. It's running Final Fantasy VII. So the fact that it's able to run these games, I would say it's fine that it's $450. That being said, though, I agree that also that what he said, it wasn't as bad, but it's still, I think that just like the meaning also behind this is not great as well. I think that's my biggest issue here, is the fact that the Switch, and also yes, the Switch first Switch, it's not going to be getting all the games that the Switch 2 is going to be getting, which is, kind of, you're saying that, oh, you'll still be getting games, you'll be part of the, what's the exact word he said here? You'll have an opportunity to come into our gaming universe. Well, yeah, but not the entire universe. I mean, not even including, third-party games, just the first-party stuff. Like you said, Super Mario Kart World's not going to be a part of the Switch 1. I don't think the Donkey Kong game's going to be part of Switch 1, unless I'm wrong. Yeah, that's not going to be there. What, maybe the Kirby racing game, that might not be there on Switch 1. So, I mean, granted, we don't know anything more details on that, but, how many games are going to be made for the Switch 1 and whatnot? That's going to be the thing, where you say, yeah, you don't have all these games, but you're still part of the same universe, guys. Come on. And also, additionally, the Switch 1 has not been discounted. It's still $300. And
yeah.
Essentially, it's still going to be $300. And I mean, if you look back at previous generations, now granted also, no, I think maybe, unless I'm wrong, maybe the PS5 did it? Did they drop the price? Or no?
No.
Or did they increase?
They increased. with the Slim. I mean, technically the price didn't change. I think with the the regular PS5, other than the fact that they basically only did it with bundles, but the Slim is more expensive than the regular PS5.
Well, I take back what I said. But at least on Nintendo's side, from every previous console generation, they've dropped the prices over time. I mean, I don't even remember how much it cost at launch, but I do remember going into like a Walmart or Sam's Club and seeing GameCubes for $100. I mean, they probably cost, I think, $200 at launch or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got my Wii U, I got that new bundled with Super Mario 3D World. I think it was $200. Unless I got it at GameStop. And what was the original price? Like $350 or something like that?
Yeah. That's what I paid for it.
You could buy the games new over time. I mean, cheaper over time. The Switch has not had a price drop yet, and I thought at some point Nintendo would have dropped the price of a Switch, like to maybe $250, $200. But no, it's still the same $300. And now they're gonna say that we're still gonna provide support for us, and if you want to buy a cheaper alternative, we've got the Switch. Still the same $300 it was on March 3rd, 2017. So that's the thing that also really gets me, is the fact that you want to say it's a more affordable option. Yes, you could, saying it is more affordable than a Switch 2, but at the same time, it's still the same price as the original Switch on the original release. So that's the part that also just gets me. It's like, if you want to make it affordable, give a price cut already. I mean, it's been 8 years, guys. Come on. I mean, I feel like the only thing you can say that's a very low bar to clear, and that's, well, at least they didn't raise the price like the other consoles. But again, that's just a low bar to set anyway. But yeah, that's essentially everything I have to say on this matter.
Yeah, at this point, I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen with everything, and I'm hoping that if Nintendo doesn't change course and do something different with pricing, particularly with games and everything else, that they suffer significantly. They just need to be knocked down a peg, like PlayStation was when it came to the PS3. I mean, or, like Nintendo was with the 3DS. They launched it at $250, and then because of how absolutely poorly it did at launch, they dropped the price by $80 or 70. I think it was I think that they dropped the price down to 180 from 250, and then they gave early adopters something extra. They gave all of us who were early adopters 20 free games. I mean, 10 NES games, 10 Game Boy Advance games, which basically if you were not an ambassador, you couldn't get those Game Boy Advance games, apart from through software modding and everything. But and I didn't even buy mine full price. I bought mine used for $200, and that was before, but it was before they did the price drop. So I spent $50 less and still got the ambassador stuff. So it was pretty cool. But anyway, so yeah, we'll see how everything goes with all of this. I still want the Switch 2 because I still think it's a cool piece of tech. Not necessarily because I think it's like, oh, super powerful. It's not as powerful as a high-end PC, despite what some fanboys are saying. And it probably is more powerful than the Steam Deck, but that's irrelevant. I wasn't planning to get it because of that. I wanted to get it because I like the tech and because there's games that I'll want to play on there. Plus, also because it can play my Switch library. And because of the fact that I have 3 kids using my Switch all the time now. Although, something I've contemplated about, which I'm not going to do, but I've contemplated the idea of, maybe I just, instead of buying a Switch 2, I just get some Switch lights for the kids. Let them play that, or, something to that effect. But then I thought about it, and it's like, well, but unless I can find like cheap Switch lights, I would basically be spending more money for 3 Switch lights than I would just spending the money for one Switch 2. And yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, that would give me access. Then I could just play my Switch again and not worry about it. But anyway, I'm rambling a little bit here. So moving on. So we had another topic that I wanted to discuss, and that is regarding what Hidetaka Miyazaki has said about Duskbloods, which, of course, last week we were talking about it. We were both very excited about it, and then we got news that it's online only, PvPvE, and multiplayer focused with no single player. And went from being super excited to completely losing interest. Which is a shame, because the game also happens to have 12 different playable characters and various other things. I didn't watch like the developer interview because of the fact that I found out about all that. And of course it was also playing on Friday when I was traveling and all that. But anyway, going into the actual story related to this, and obviously when you get to your turn to talk about stuff, you can also say what you think about what we found out about Duskbloods. But Miyazaki has promised that with Duskbloods being a Switch 2 exclusive and, being multiplayer, that it's not going to distract FromSoft from doing their traditional single-player games, which have been their bread and butter for such a long time. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree. This was very disheartening to hear. Now, granted, I was very uncertain if I would get the game, because I was thinking, well, maybe it could be, eventually just be a timed exclusive and come over to PC or something like that. But then hearing that it's online only and there's no way to do single player at all, it's just really disappointing. And like you said, I lost all interest that I had in the game. And I mean, at least for something like Night Rain, at least I think, even though it's not optimal, it's possible to do some stuff by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But with this, it's just no dice at all. You have to do it multiplayer. So that's definitely a shame. But I do at least appreciate the fact that Miyazaki said, hey, we have not given up doing single player games. We still want to do that, which, I mean, I feel like that's sort of something we sort of know, because that is almost the hallmark of a FromSoft game, is that you have that core single player experience. And sure, there are online elements that they add to those games, but at the core, they make single player games. So it's definitely good to have that reassurance that they're going to come back to what they've done that they're known for, which is just core single player experiences, adding in some multiplayer features, of course. But who knows, maybe eventually they could do something, which I know there was a mod for this, but maybe they could do something down the road where it's official, where they have a full feature to play a Souls type of game completely in multiplayer. Like, I know that's something that, like I said, there's a mod that someone made recently, I think, where I think it's for Dark Souls. I don't know which one, but essentially you can play the game with someone else summoned and go through the entire game, essentially, because it sort of overwrites the thing where they would be sent back to the world after, a set after a set thing parameter. So you could essentially play the entire game with a friend if you wanted to that way. So if From Software wants to implement that as an option, I'd be fine with that for people who want to do that. Because some people do actually want to play, a Souls game and say, hey, let's play Souls together. And, rather than just saying, okay, let's just do this boss fight or something, get to this area. Some people might want to play the whole game with a friend or something like that. So if they have that option, that's great. But let's just focus on the single player stuff, though. But yeah, that's essentially everything I have to say.
Yeah, I'm... Like I said, of course, I'm obviously super disappointed about Duskbloods not having any single player and being online only, and the fact that it has a PvP as a big part of the focus. I mean, it's PvPvE, but it's like, I don't want to do that. And now if I could turn off the PvP, I might be more interested in it. But the fact that it's online only and multiplayer focused just completely killed my enthusiasm for the game, which is such a shame, because it's like, even the exclusivity, like, I wasn't a fan of it. I would prefer it's on PC, but I was still willing to support it because of the fact that I like FromSoft games, and like, I don't have a problem. I mean, I was already going to have a Switch 2 anyway, so it's like, hey, I'd play that, but with it not having single player and having to be online, that just completely kills it. So, in terms of what he said about single player versus online stuff, I am very glad that that's the case, especially with them doing 2 online multiplayer focused games, within probably a year of each other, basically. But I'm just not interested in that type of game, not for a FromSoft game, especially because a lot of times, well, I will occasionally have online turned on when I'm playing one of their games. I like having, not having to worry about that. Like, I played Dark Souls and Dark Souls 3 almost exclusively on the Steam Deck. And a large part of that was the fact that I wasn't required to be online all the time in order to play them. Same thing has been with Dark Souls 2. I basically have hardly had online turned on at all, because then anytime I need to stop playing, I can just put the system asleep and then pick back up where I left off the next time I turn it on, and I'm good to go. And that's super helpful for a game like that. Not having that option on the Switch 2 for Duskbloods just it kills it for me. But yeah, once again, I'm very glad that that these types of games are not going to prevent them from doing the regular single player focused games, especially because I still have quite a few of their ones, the ones they put out, not even counting all the like old stuff that I'm probably never going to touch, like Kingsfield and whatnot. But I want to enjoy more single player games from them, because they are experts at making these games and making them great. So that is all I have to say on that.
Nothing else from me.
All right, so we have one final topic for tonight before we get into our listener question, and that is Nate Bieldorf, who is part of Nintendo, primarily does stuff with Treehouse and that sort of thing. I believe he's a part of localization team as well, was recently interviewed, and I believe it was, I can't remember which event it was, but I want to say it was maybe Tim Geddes from Kinda Funny, if I'm not mistaken. I may be remembering this incorrectly. I'd have to look at this again. Let me give me 1 second.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So let's see here. Okay, so yes, it was at a Switch 2 press event, and it was Tim Geddes from Kinda Funny. One of the few people from Kinda Funny that I actually kind of like, but he had spoken to Nate Bieldorf from Nintendo and asked him basically just with Wind Waker coming to the game to Nintendo Switch Online for the GameCube version, does that mean that Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD aren't going to come? And Nate Bildorf basically just said, don't rule anything out. It could still happen. So what are your thoughts?
It would be nice if those got ported over. I mean, granted, I don't know how much of it's saying, yeah, we haven't ruled it out, but we have no plans to do that, or if it's something like, yeah, we have that in the works, but I don't want to spoil anything. That's really the thing I'm sort of torn about, whether like how to interpret that.
Well, what he said was, no, all options are on the table.
Right, but I don't know if it's like, yeah, we could do it, but it's not something we're working on, as opposed to like we're working on it now, but we don't want to say anything specific, like it's coming soon or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's sort of like the way I want to like interpret what he said. But right. I do hope though, if that comes, or like saying nothing is, off the table, I hope that also means we could get Metroid Prime 2 remastered. I mean, sure, it hasn't happened yet. It's not like it's getting a port or anything like that, but, say they brought Metroid Prime 2 over through Switch Online. I still would want to have that remastered because it just feels so lonely just having one. Yeah. And of course, if you have two, you gotta have three.
Yeah.
And if they did a trilogy collection like they did with the Wii, and if they had a collector's edition like they did with the Wii, guess what's going on my shelf?
Yeah. Steelbook.
A man of quality.
Yes, indeed. Although the disc is not in there. What did I do with the disc?
Ooh.
You know what? I bet it's probably in my Wii U. I think that was the last game I was playing was Metroid Prime 2. And I was playing it on the Wii U. That's probably where it is.
Lots of good games to be playing, so I'm not going to fault you for that. But
I mean, I was still in Alaska when I was playing that, so that was quite a few years ago.
But I also wonder, though, if that would also mean if there were any other games that they haven't ported yet, or games that they could port over, or I guess remaster in a sense, would they do that? Because, I mean, sure, you could... saying nothing's off the table implies that the possibilities are nearly endless. So could we have those types of things happen at some point in time? That would be cool to have. I mean, granted, don't get me wrong. I think that a lot of the games from the GameCube, they play perfectly well. And Nintendo said that they were, I think, up-resing the games for the Switch 2. But if you could have some of that polish, that could, just add a nice fresh coat of paint on things and enhance things further. So, and also, owning those games rather than renting them online, I think that's also a huge benefit in the grand scheme of things, because, eventually, say, you want to play offline or something like that, you can't do that with the GameCube games online, whereas, if you have the cartridge or if you have it downloaded, you can go ahead and do that. So that would be great to have. But yeah, that's everything I have to say on the matter.
Yeah, I obviously want this to happen. And, like you said, with more than just Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD, the big thing that would make the difference for me is if they actually did them at 60 frames per second, because there's no reason why they can't. And the main reason why I would want that more than anything else, especially with Wind Waker, is because while Wind Waker emulates great on the Steam Deck, at least the Wii U version, I have never tried the GameCube version, it is stuck at 30 frames per second. There's no mods that I know of to get it up to 60. And if they could put it as a 60 frames per second game, oh, that would be so nice. That would be probably a day one purchase for me, because that's one thing, is that as much as I love Wind Waker, like I played Wind Waker several times. I played it on the GameCube, and then I played it on the Wii U, and it's just like, it's a phenomenal game. But being stuck at 30 frames per second sucks. The one thing that I will say that I will definitely miss about the Wii U version is the gamepad functionality. That was just something that was really, really nice for the Wii U version. And that's one thing that I can do on the Steam Deck that I wouldn't be able to do on the Switch. I mean, yes, you have the touchscreen, and yes, you can tactically do it, but it's a little less simple, I guess, because like with the Wii U version, of course, you had the two separate screens, and so you could, do whatever you needed to do on the gamepad, and it was very simple on the fly, that sort of thing. When you're having to actually pause the game to go to a menu to do that, it makes it take a little bit longer. And like on the Steam Deck, I just had the switching to the gamepad screen mapped to the back button, so I could just press the back button and then do the screen release, and I'm good to go, back to normal. So yeah, that's the only thing. But either way, I'm glad to hear that them putting these games on Switch Online doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to come otherwise. So that is good news. And yeah, I'm hoping that maybe because of the fact that they ended up not releasing Metroid Prime 2 and 3, that they are in fact going to do full remasters like they did for the first game, because those games just deserve it. I mean, that's one thing that I'm willing to spend the money on. Now, obviously, I would prefer that, like what they did with Metroid Prime Remastered, it would be similarly priced. I don't have faith that the Nintendo will do that, but the other thing that I thought of that could be really cool is that they did those full remasters, and potentially they could also patch this into the existing Metroid Prime Remaster, that they probably would just charge you an extra $10 to do it, but is add mouse mode controls for those games. That would be pretty nifty. Yeah. And I mean, if they add mouse mode controls and 120 frames per second as an option on the Switch 2, those would be sweet upgrades. But I know with what we've seen from Nintendo that more likely than not, they would just end up charging you for those upgrades, because they can, and because people aren't going to push back enough to actually get them to not do that. They should. That's all I got, though.
Same here.
All right, so we have our listener question once again from Beer Money Vic. Question is, if you were in a contest to collect money by imposing fake tariffs on fake products, what would be most lucrative? I would impose tariffs on Midgar and Mako Energy.
Wow, that's ugh. That's. I feel like that's possibly the best answer, and I honestly can't think of anything off the top of my head that would come close to that. So I guess I'll just have to agree with his answer.
Yeah, I mean, that it's hard to top that one. I've been trying to think of whether or not there was any other option that would be better. And I don't want to just be boring and say, just have all three of, him and the both of us saying all the same exact thing. So I'm trying to think of something else.
Oh.
While I think about that, did you have any other discussion topics that you wanted to bring up?
Nothing from me this week, although I was wondering, could you do something like that? Now, I haven't played much of this, but considering the fact that, there are currencies and stuff like that and resources, could you do something similar to like that? Or is there something you could impose tariffs in say, like, Animal Crossing? Because bells are a currency, correct? From my
yes, yeah, bells are on a currency. do tariffs on turnips, because I mean that's it can be one of the fastest ways to make money in those games. It's just one of those that it's like it fluctuates dramatically on how valuable they are. But yeah. Let's say Animal Crossing and turnips. That's what we'll do the tariffs on. So then you instead of making sometimes 1,000 bells per turnip, or whatever it was. Honestly, I don't remember what the max was I ever came across. It would just end up being, like with the tariffs, you'd be making a tenth of that or something like that. I don't know. I still have to agree that the Maka one is the best one, best idea. All right. Well, in that case, let's get into our recommendations and dissuasions. Start us off.
All right, so my recommendation is going to be... Oh, whoops, that's the wrong one there. Let me pull that back up. All right, yeah, cool. So my recommendation is actually just going to be to try out Swallow the Sea. I think it's a good idea, and primarily if you enjoy Katamari, and if you want something that is similar to it, but might be as dense. I mean, it's short, but it's a pretty enjoyable experience. Controls are simple. You're just using a mouse anyway, so it's not like it's in depth or anything. And I think that the 2D aspect translates well from Katamari, which is 3D. So, and also I would actually kind of appreciate some more games like that in a 2D sphere. So if anyone is a dev and wants to do something with that, go ahead, let me know, and put it on Steam so I can wishlist it. But yeah, so I recommend Swallow the Sea.
All right, good stuff. Well, I'm going to recommend something that I finally got around to trying, that I've heard about for years. I think probably the first time being when I played Persona 4 Golden, but it's possible it was before that. And that is one of the Japanese comfort foods that exists out there, and that is a fried rice omelet. Like I said, I'd heard about this for years. It always sounded interesting, but I wasn't really sure what it would be like, because I don't know, like I think I tried doing something similar once, but it was just me kind of faking it using some fried rice that I had available. And it was fine, but the recipe that I found from this great Korean couple, their channel called Aaron and Claire. Aaron is the one who does who does all the recipes, but he makes the food for him and his wife, and he did a recipe for what's referred to as omu rice, which is fried rice omelet. And oh man, it was so good. It was so good, and it really was not difficult. I mean, it took a little bit of work, mostly just because it was my first time making it, but man, it was so good that I ended up having it 2 meals in a row, and then ended up, I still have a little bit of the rice left over and some more of the sauce for on top. Probably going to have it for my lunch tomorrow at work, or dinner, depending on how things work out, since we'll be doing leftovers tomorrow. But yeah, fried rice omelet. And if you want a good recipe, check out aaronclaire.com, and that is a great place to check out the fried rice omelet recipe, or omu rice. So yes, that is my recommendation.
Very nice, very delicious.
Now, since you've been to Japan, did you ever try a fried rice omelet at all?
Unfortunately, no. That is something that I had wanted to try while I was there, but I didn't have a chance to try that out while I was over there.
Well, try that recipe I sent you. It's not difficult. I mean, you could... The recipe is small enough that you could very easily just make enough for one, or I think that's probably basically a recipe for two. I made it for 4 people, so I ended up with a bunch of extra rice. But yeah,
Yeah, I'll
try
definitely
it out. You'll like
give
it.
that a shot.
I thought about doing it for my channel, but I figured since it would just literally be copying their recipe, I don't think I'd be making any real modifications to it. I won't bother with it. But yeah, it's good stuff. All right, dissuasions.
My dissuasion is going to be, do not play the Wall World DLC unless you absolutely want to get all the achievements in the game. I feel like it's kind of a downgrade to the base game, and sure, while there are certain items and stuff that you can bring over with you into the base game if you want to try to get all the stuff in that version. At the same time, the DLC just feels kind of unfair to a fault, and it really loses a lot of the luster that the base game had. And I feel like after you beat it the first time, there's really no reason to go back and play it again, unless, like I said, you want to get all the achievements, which is kind of at the point where I'm at, but even then I'm finding a hard time to keep doing it. So don't play the DLC. If you must play the game, just play the base game and call it a day.
Good to know. All right, well, my dissuasion is going to be, this is just kind of a general thing, but in light of everything that's been going on with the tariffs and the way that people have been jumping to conclusions on one side or the other of the matter, my dissuasion is, do not let your bias get in the way of viewing situations with some sort of objectivity, and don't let yourself be too quick to jump to conclusions about what's going on, because it may seem like everything is super dire and everything is really bad, and then as things progress, it turns out that everything was not as bad as it seemed. Now, everything looks bad. I'm not going to lie about that. It does look bad. But right now, things are it's too early for us to be able to say definitively everything is going to burn to the ground and we're all going to be screwed and all this other stuff. But I just think this is kind of a general rule, because this isn't just with this. This is with lots of situations. I've seen lots of situations where, like, there's been some story that's come out and people have jumped on a bandwagon of, you know, being on one side or another of an issue and been so quick to believe one side to be true, and then it turns out that side was not true at all. Once all the facts came out, it's like, oh, this wasn't what I thought it was at all. And so I just think it's really important with hot button issues like this, and like many other situations, just take a step back, wait and see what happens, what information you get. Otherwise, you're just going to end up in situations where you're getting yourself all worked up over what ends up being nothing. And I'm not saying that this tariff situation is going to be nothing. We honestly have no idea. I just think it's best to take a step back and wait. Wait to see what happens. Do what you need to do. You know, if that's you know, when it comes to the situations where it's not something as apparently serious as the tariffs, when it's a situation where, like, you're observing like a news story or something like that, and it looks like it's one way or the other depending on your bias on a particular situation, just take a step back and wait until you get all the information before you come to a conclusion. And I guess to go along with that, don't let yourself get too stressed out or worried about things over which you have no control. Because the reality is, this is a situation like many others where we really don't have any control over what's happening. All we can do is do whatever we're able to do. And for those of us who are believers, you know, we can trust God in the matter. And that's not always easy. I know just as well as anybody else that it's not always easy. But when we do, things work out. one way or the other. So that's all I got.
Very, very, very good. Very good.
All right. Well, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel. I am Zeracon. That's youtube.com/I am Zeracon. Oh, and also I just forgot to spell it. IAMXERACON. So yeah, youtube.com/I am Zeracon. Put out 2 videos this week. The first one was finally the Nintendo GameCube modded version, so showing that off, and as well as what's capable of and showing how that works. And then also put out a video discussing the prices of Nintendo's games for the Switch 2 and why, no matter what how we feel about it, it's very likely that it won't matter because Nintendo will win. You can't beat the house, as they say. Next video I'm going to be making, though, is going to be a more cheerful one, talking about my enjoyment of the 6th gen of consoles and why I feel like that is the best console gen ever. Not sure when that's going to come out, but that is the one that I will have in the works. But that's everything.
Good stuff. All right, well, you can find me on my YouTube channel at TheFrozenGamer87. No new content there. It's just been kind of a time period where I really haven't had much ability to put together videos. I'm hoping to start getting some stuff out soon, but I'm not making any promises. I do have a Rumble channel along the same lines, but the same name, but it currently has no content on it other than just one of the test streams that I did before Extra Life. Speaking of Extra Life, I will mention, of course, if you are extremely bored and just want to see what video games I played for 24 hours, there is still the on-demand version of the 24-hour live stream broken up into 3 parts from a few weeks ago. So there's that. I also have a YouTube cooking channel, Not Authentic But Delicious. That's YouTube at NABD Cooking. And nothing new for a while, but there's still lots of great recipes on there. And I highly recommend, especially if you are someone who enjoys different ways of cooking things and also likes to, especially if you're a person who is not confident as a cook, my channel can be a great resource for you, as it does provide detailed instructions, of course, on how to make things, but also I do my best to try and give answers to questions that you may not necessarily get from some of the bigger channels that assume basically people are just wanting to speed through. So I try to make it as noob friendly as possible for my recipes, and even though I haven't put anything out in a while, there's 30 some odd recipes, I believe, on the channel. I don't remember the exact number. And there will be more in the future. It's just, once again, busy time right now. I haven't really been able to do a whole lot with that. So there's that. There's also the YouTube and Rumble channels for the podcast, which is at the Orange Box Pod, at the Orange Box Podcast on YouTube. On Rumble, it doesn't have a custom URL, but you can find the Orange Box Podcast there as well. Both of those, it's a video version of our podcast every week, normally 7 a.m. Central Time, barring any technical issues. And not only in the video version can you see our beautiful faces, but you can also see gameplay clips from any games we've been playing, as well as clips from videos from like stuff we're talking about, including everything about the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct that we talked about last week. Then there's also the Orange Box Pod Clips channel, which is where I post the various segments of the podcast. Normally each week. It's been 2 or 3 weeks since the last time I put up clips, but you can find that both on YouTube and Rumble. And there you just get the different segments of our discussion topics without having to listen to the 2.5-hour or longer podcast as it was last week. And then, of course, you can find our podcast on all audio podcast platforms, or at least all major ones, including YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Amazon Music, probably some others that I just don't remember off the top of my head, but that normally goes live 12 a.m. Central Time every Friday, except when I have technical issues like last week where it ended up being closer to like 12:30 a.m., something like that. But anyway, regardless, that is pretty much everything on that end. Of course, if you would like to contact us, you can send us an email to the orangeboxpodcast@gmail.com, or you can also write us on X/Twitter at the orangeboxpod. You can comment on the video version of the podcast or on the pod clips, and if you do any of those things, we'll be sure to get back to you and or read it on the podcast depending on the content involved. I believe that's everything. So, last chance, any final thoughts?
No, sir.
All right, well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zaracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast. And until next time, remember that celery is neither a weapon nor a toy. Orange Box Podcast, out.